Boom! I was lucky. Moments before, I was peering into this battery box, checking the voltage, and then there was a loud explosion, and there was battery acid spilling onto the floor and fizzing away into the ground. It really was quite exciting. The passenger door was open at the time, and the lid of the battery box flung up so hard that it put this dent in the door. Hello, I'm James the Grumpy Petrolhead. This is our 1926 Standard Wellesbourne motor car. I went to start it the other day and it wouldn't turn over. So I took the battery off and charged it, put the battery back on, showing 12.5 volts. Tried again, still wouldn't turn over. Next, I got myself a slave battery and some jump leads, connected those up, and it started, and I drove the car outside the garage. I disconnected the starter battery and let the car tick over for a while, and I checked the voltage on both batteries, and that's when the fun started. That battery proper exploded. Fortunately, it's inside that quite heavy wooden battery box, so the explosion was somewhat contained. But there was acid everywhere. Some acid got into the car, and there was acid all over the floor and all over the running boards. Luckily, we have a hose pipe very close by, so I just hosed it down. I even had to hose inside the car. So today, I explain why this happened and why it was my fault. So up until now, the car's been running fine, and I was pretty much monitoring the state of the battery charging with the ammeter, mostly leaving it on dynamo. But if I was getting too much wavering into the plus, I just turned the dynamo off for a few miles, and that worked fine for years. However, things started to go wrong. The dial on the ammeter started to sort of blister and distort, and that meant the needle would no longer flow backwards and forwards. My mistake was assuming that the dynamo was working fine on the D setting, and so for the next year or so I've just been driving it with the dynamo left on all the time, and not worrying about the ammeter. That was a mistake. So now I need to investigate why this happened, what went wrong, and more importantly, how can I stop it happening again? So the first thing we're going to do is have a little look at this basic charging system on the Standard. Here we have the incredibly simple layout of the electrics on the Standard car. This side is the lights, off, side lights and headlights, so that's nice and simple. Now this side we have off, so everything's off. That says M for magneto, so that turns the ignition on. And D is for dynamo, which turns the dynamo on, or the charging system. We put the switch onto magneto, then we can start the car either with the starter button or the starter handle, and then we can turn the dynamo on, and that supplies a charge to the battery. And inside, just inside here, there's a cut-off switch, so if the battery gets too highly charged, it simply cuts off, and when the battery voltage drops, the cut-off switch turns on again, and we can monitor the flow to the battery by this ammeter here. So pretty simple. According to the original owner's manual that we have, it's quite acceptable to leave it on dynamo and let the switch do its thing, turning itself on and off, and you can just basically forget about it. But obviously you want to have a little glance down here now and again to make sure you're not discharging or overcharging. Here's the magneto, just here. There's a distributor end of the magneto, and tucked up behind, if I can get the camera in there, probably a bit dark, but you can see that there is an ignition coil at the end of this lead. So what's happened in the distant past is the magneto probably needs rewinding. So what somebody's done is put an ignition coil with a condenser to use the magneto simply as a distributor, and the power comes for the spark, the power comes from the coil, and that's all fine. That's quite a common thing to do on an old car. But also what's happened is down here they put a switch, which is basically, although it's a three-way switch, it has two positions, off and on, for the ignition. So it seems the car ignition system has been slightly altered, but that little switch under the dash, what I've discovered is that the switch, when it's on M for magneto, the regulator is actually on as well, and the car is being charged, and the cut-off switch is actually working fine. It's turning on and off, and it keeps the battery at around 12.5 volts, which is perfect. When you put the switch to D or put the dynamo on, the dynamo is permanently on. It seems to cut out the regulator totally and is constantly charging the battery, and there's no regulation. So what this means is the battery is being constantly overcharged. So now that I know what's going on, when I drive the car daily, I just keep it onto the magneto position, which means the car is being charged and it's being regulated, and the regulator seems to work, and I can keep my eye on it on the ammeter. But when I put the lights on, I flick it over to dynamo, and it just about stays on the 0 mark with the lights on and the dynamo working. When the revs are up, it does go into the plus. So then I can manage it manually, the charging of the battery, by keeping my eye on the ammeter. In other words, the system is actually working fine, but I didn't fully understand it, and I made that error by ignoring my stuck ammeter. To get the ammeter working again, I had to take the dial off because it was so twisted and deformed. In fact, the dial just crumbled away, and I very carefully wrote plus and minus on the ammeter, so I could see which way was charging, which way was discharging. So what I'd like to do in the future is make a copy of that original ammeter dial and make it look like it used to. But in the meantime, I'll just have to make do with my my own ammeter dial. So why then did my battery explode? Well, here's what I think. I was overcharging the battery for some time. When a battery gets overcharged, it can get too hot, and inside the battery there's a mixture of sulfuric acid diluted with distilled water, and I think the distilled water evaporated and leaving mostly sulfuric acid in the battery. And when a battery is charged, it gives off hydrogen gas, and hydrogen gas is very explosive. Now normally the charging of the battery is kept under control, and you don't lose all that distilled water, and the little bit of gas that is produced when the battery is charging just vents naturally into the atmosphere, and there's no real problem. But when you're running low on distilled water and you've got a lot of undiluted sulfuric acid and the battery's being overcharged, you get a lot of hydrogen gas. Now this gas doesn't need much to ignite it. It could be a little bit of static electricity, it could be a spark from a battery terminal, and I'm wondering if it could be one of the lead plates warping and touching another one, making a little bit of a spark. In any case, when that hydrogen gas ignites and it's contained inside the battery, so it is like a bomb. I do believe this is a very rare occurrence. On most more modern machines, the charging systems are much more sophisticated, and I think this is unlikely to happen in most cases. And in our over 40 odd years of messing about with old cars and bikes, this has never happened to me before, and it is my fault for ignoring the ammeter on the car. So what I've learned is not to assume that the wiring is correct on any of the vehicles I have, and it doesn't take much to look into it and to check it with a multimeter. So there you are, an exploding battery on our old car, but fortunately no real damage was done, and it's been a learning curve, an exciting one. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the Grumpy Petrolhead. Please stick around, because next time we'll be looking at some more old vehicles, and hope to see you then. So, cheerio. Beautiful.